someone told me, they said, there's some news. I said, okay, well, what's going on? They said, well, Anthony Bourdain has died. He committed suicide. Anyone know who Anthony Bourdain is? I think, okay, we know who he is, right? And then there was a couple weeks before that, I think it was Kate Spade that committed suicide. For those of you who are in touch with the fashion world, maybe not the fellas, but I'm sure the sisters probably know who I'm talking about, right? And so it got me thinking, when I was reflecting upon kind of Surah Al-Qadr, that there is, when you start reading Surah Al-Qadr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا لَيْلَةُ الْقَدْرِ. What will make you know about Laylatul Qadr? Like the value of Laylatul Qadr, right? And of course, in the sense that what will make you know like how great this very night is because of the reward in it. But on another hand, from another perspective, it is the night upon what? What happens on this night? Help me out here. Okay, Jibreel comes down, that's one. What's the main thing? What's the crux? What does this surah start with? The Quran, right? The Quran comes down. So in a sense, it's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us what will make you know the value of the Quran. Like what truly does the Quran mean to you? And so now when I was thinking about this, I said instead of me speaking about what we kind of probably have heard Ramadan after Ramadan after Ramadan, right? In the sense that here's what the value of Laylatul Qadr is. The angels come down. Jibreel alayhi salam comes down. He's making dua for you and so on and so on and so on. I wanted to look at it from a different perspective. That perhaps we may understand what is the value of the Quran. What is the value of this religion? What is the value of being Muslim? And that is looking at it from a perspective of not being Muslim, of not having the Quran, of not believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What would your life be like? What would it mean that may Allah protect us, all of us, from this, that tomorrow you wake up and there's no Islam, no Quran, nothing. What would your life be like? And I wanted to kind of take just a journey down this path so that perhaps we understand what is truly the value of this Quran. And by extension, what is the value of Laylatul Qadr, right? So first and foremost, if you didn't have a belief in God right off the bat, it has certain implications. It means certain things. What it means is that your belief is that everything that can be explained via a physical cause. Now stay with me. I know it's like 3 in the morning, but you'll get to the point soon. Everything can be explained via a physical cause. Everything happens randomly, without any rationale behind it, without any intention behind it. All just physical causes that just happen to happen, right? So there's no, when you think about emotions, happiness, sadness, they're all just random happenings. They're all just random occurrences, right? If at that. So there's no foresight behind it. There's no objective behind it. There's no purpose behind it. Because everything can be explained via physical, natural causes. And by the way, for those who are interested, this is known as philosophical naturalism, right? This is what the science is based upon. You cannot have a metaphysical explanation for things. Anyhow, so if that's the case, let's start off with number one. What is the first thing you would experience? What is the first logical conclusion of this? The first conclusion is that you cannot have hope. There's no hope. What do we mean by hope? When we say hope, hope is the feeling or expectation or desire for something to happen. You expect something to happen. You have hope. But if everything is blind, non-rational, random, how can you have hope? What do you have hope in if it's all just randomly happening? So right off the bat, there's no hope. And beyond that, there's no ultimate hope. So we're talking about hope in the sense that I hope for getting a better job. I hope to get married. I hope for this. But what about ultimate hope? In the sense that what happens when you die? There's no ultimate hope whatsoever. You know, sometimes I ask the question that if that was the situation one was in, they didn't have any belief in the hereafter or Allah or anything like that, how would you console someone who's passed away or whose child has passed away? What would you tell them? Like, oh, I'm sorry that your child moved from one state of carbon particles to another state of carbon particles. What are you going to tell this person? Because logically, you cannot give them hope. There is no hope under this framework. So the first thing that you lose is hope. And when you compare that to the Islamic framework, our religion is full of hope. Every single chapter you start opening, with the exception of one, is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Right? In the name of Allah, the most merciful and the most gracious. Right? It's full of hope. That your heart is tied to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Point after point after point. Right? So, when it comes to that, number one, there's no hope. But let me extend that a little further. There's no hope for justice. I want you to think about this one for a second. Right? As human beings, we crave justice. We want wrongs to be corrected, and so on and so forth. But if everything can be explained via rational or non-rational, blind, random occurrences, then how do you hope for justice? Because when Hitler died, he went to another state of carbonation, right? And when someone pious died, let's say Ibrahim alayhi salam, that they went to another state of carbonation, right? So where's the justice in that? One man went and basically killed millions of people, and another man spent his entire life in terms of the apex of virtue, and yet at the end they're equalized? Think about it. So there's no hope for justice. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even mentions this, right? أَفَنَجْعَلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ كَالْمُجْرِمِينَ? Are you going to now treat the Muslims, the one who has submitted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like you're going to treat the criminals? مَا لَكُمْ كَيْفَ تَحْكُمُونَ? What's the matter with you? How do you judge? Right? So there's no hope for ultimate justice. Okay? No hope for ultimate justice. Right? Okay. Now this one's the interesting one. No value. Now what do I mean by this? I mean, imagine now that you have, like, where's my water bottle here? Like, there's this water bottle, okay? Someone comes in and they come in through the door and they have a hammer in their hand, okay? And they're saying, you know what, I'm really upset today. And I'm gonna either hit Fahad or I'm gonna hit this water bottle, okay? Now, what would you recommend this person? For those of you who like me, not for those of you who don't like me, okay? What would you recommend? Look, you're angry, hit which one? We'd hope the bottle, inshallah, right? Okay, why? No, but as a Muslim, you can say, okay, yeah, there's a value in human life. Under that framework, where do you get value? If this is just matter, and I'm just matter, what makes me more valuable than this bottle? Where, and to take the question further, where does value even come from? Right? If it's just cold, lifeless matter, then there's no difference in value between me and this water bottle. Yes or no? Right? Okay. Now the thing is that when it comes to Islam, the whole concept is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the source of value, of placing value. In fact, we call this night the night Laylatul Qadr. Qadr comes from this idea of measuring out. The decrees are measured out, right? But there is a tying in between being able to measure something out and power. Now, what do I mean? Because if you are the source by which you can measure, the tools by which you can measure, then you ultimately have power. In other words, like, I'll give an example. So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions, إِنَّ عِدَّةُ الشَّهُورِ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ إِثْنَ عَشْرَ شَهْرًا. That with Allah, or that the months that are there are 12 months with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? Where does that measurement come from? You have the one that made the sun, the one that made the moon, the one that made the earth the earth turn around, is the one that's giving you the very basis by which you're able to measure things. Yes or no? So therefore, the one that has that is the one that has ultimate power. That's why sometimes you see this is translated the night of power. Why? Right? Because the one that gives you the tools to be able to measure is the one that's giving you power, is the one that's powerful in the end. Right? He is the one that's giving you the yardstick. The one that created the yardstick in the first place. Right? Huwal awwalu wal akhiru. He is the first and the last. Because if He wasn't there, how do you assign value to anything? How do you have a standard by which you can measure anything? It's impossible, right? And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ, that He has placed the mizan. He gives you the standard by which you're able to measure things, right? And so when it comes down to it, it has to do with this idea of being able to measure, this idea of giving value. Now, what about honor? Because the concept of honor is tied with the concept of value. This is also known, Laylatul Qadr is also known as the night of honor. The word Qadr can mean honor as well. But where does ultimate honor come from? Who assigns honor? What makes something more honorable than the other? What makes me more valuable than this water bottle? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Otherwise, how could you assign honor to anything? It would be impossible, frankly, in that worldview, right? And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ كَرَمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. Indeed, we have honored the children of Adam. That's why the human being has more value than, let's say, certain animals, which have more value than plants, that have more value than so on and so forth. You have this rarefied scheme that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that if you didn't believe in Allah, that you didn't have a standard by which to do that, you wouldn't be able to do that. Taking it to its logical conclusion. Okay. Now, let me go to the next one. Purpose. If you didn't have a belief in a creator, you didn't have belief in revelation, in the akhirah, what is your purpose? So for those of you who know, I started school at UT Austin. And at UT, it's a very liberal environment. And I didn't quite know how liberal it was until I actually got there, okay? It was so liberal that, they have tables for those of you who went to college here. And anyone went to college in the U.S.? Let me just see some hands. Okay, you have. All right, so they have like tables, right? So the Christians have their tables, and the Jews might have their tables. Well, not really, but and then you have other groups that have their table. And then of course the MSA should have its table. It doesn't always, and I knocked them for that. But anyway, but this is the first time that I've seen on campus that the atheist had a table. Yeah. And I was like, you have what? What are you calling to, right? To nothing. That's what they're calling to, right? But I'm thinking, but beyond that, I'm thinking, forget what you're calling to. Why are you calling? What is the purpose? What do you gain from calling? What is your purpose in doing this? What do you gain? You have absolutely nothing to gain. There's no purpose in what you're doing. Without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's no ultimate purpose. There's no purpose for the things that you do. And then, so if Allah is not in the picture, if the Quran is not in the picture, if your deen is not in the picture, how do you assign purpose? Because ultimate purpose is not about what you're planning or stages in your life, right? That's why I remember I was listening to a talk by Sheikh Shahrawi. Anyone know who that is? Yes. All right, there we go. So he said something very powerful, and I remember it was really nice. He was talking about a certain ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, اعلموا أنما الحياة الدنيا لعب ولهو وزينة وتفاخر بينكم وتكاثر في أموال والأولاد. That know that the life of this world is but amusement and diversion and zina and adornment and boasting in one another and competition and increase in wealth and children. So he was talking about this ayah, and he says, in terms of purpose, objective. So first, he said that, look, this ayah is talking about hayat ad-dunya. He goes, right off the bat, we see that the dunya itself is something lowly, because the word dunya comes from adna, which means low. So therefore, when you juxtapose it, there's hayat ad-dunya and there's hayat al-ulya, which is al-akhirah, right? There's a higher life and then a lower life being hayat ad-dunya. But then he says, however, this dunya is too trivial to be the goal or objective itself. The objective does not have an objective behind it. Now, what does he mean? In other words, if you can say, and then what? Then that's not your goal, right? So you start off and you're in elementary school. And then what? Middle school. And then what? High school. And then what? College. And then what? Job. And then what? Marriage. And then what? Graduation for your kids. And then what? A better job. And then what? And then you die. Right? So as long as you can say, and then what? That cannot be your ultimate objective. Your ultimate objective has to have a stopping point. And therefore, when it comes down to it, there's no ultimate objective. And that's why a lot of people, when they're going through these issues of suicide, the whole concept is like, look, there's no objective. Like now that I've reached, because the people that we mentioned, they were at the apex of their careers. They're at the apex. Like you thinking about Bourdain, he was known as the great chef. I think maybe he had some Michelin stars, and he had he had his own TV show on CNN, traveling the world. I mean, what could he not have asked for, right? And similarly with Kate Spade, I just heard her interview on there's a podcast called How I Built This. And on that podcast, she went through like how she built the business and how everything she went through. And yet, you think like, why would they commit suicide? Because at a certain point, there's no purpose. And then what? Then what? There's a question that can't be answered. But that leads to my final point for tonight. Like what happens when you extract Allah from the picture, the Quran from the picture, and your deen from the picture? The final thing is that there's no ultimate happiness. I'm not saying that there's no happiness. There's no ultimate happiness. And I want you to think about this for a second. I want you to imagine now that right as you're listening to me speak, all of a sudden you black out. And when you wake up, you're on a plane. Now, stay with me, okay? So you're sitting here listening to me. You're like, man, it's late, right? And then all of a sudden you black out. And then you wake up and you're on a plane. And on this plane, the temperature is perfect. A lot of times we have issues with temperature in our houses and things like that, the masjid, and sometimes masjid fights happen, right? Like how should we set the temperature? So sometimes it's a little too cold, a little too hot, but on this plane, the temperature is perfect. And you're sitting in first class, so the seat, very comfortable. And when you look out the window, the scenery is gorgeous. It is like, a delight to the eye. It's amazing. And then the host comes, and they come with a tray which has your ultimate favorite food, right? So like you're craving biryani, boom. It's like the best biryani you've ever had in your life, right? Whatever you're craving, right? Basbousa, whatever it might be, but it is the best. And so, it's like melting in your mouth with some of these things, right? And so you have, it's like you're there. And it's like this amazing place that you're in. Okay. Would you be happy? Some people say, yeah, I'd be happy. But remember, where do we start off from? You were sitting here listening to me, you black out, you end up on this plane. So wouldn't you have some sort of questions? Would you have ultimate happiness? Like happiness in its truest sense? Because frankly, if I ended up on a plane randomly like that, I would have some questions. Number one, how did I get here? Wouldn't you have that question? How did I get here, right? Where did I come from? Like how did I get here? What am I doing here? What am I supposed to be doing here? And probably the most important question, where is the plane going? Wouldn't you have those questions? If you think about your life, you pop into existence. You're on this metaphorical plane. And if you don't have these answers from the Quran, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're lost because you don't have ultimate happiness. You don't know where you came from. You don't know why you're here, and you don't know where the plane is going. But it is from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He guided us to Islam. That we know that we came from Allah Azza wa Jal, that He created us. That we know that our purpose in life is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I did not create the jinn and the human except to worship me. And we know that the ultimate end is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The journey is back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا لَيْلَةُ الْقَدْرِ. What will make you know the value of this blessed night? And in this blessed night came down the Quran. What will make you know the value of this Quran? You see, in this blessed month, we engage with the Quran. We come to the Salah. We hear the Quran. We hear the ayat. But sometimes, it's like it is a Ramadan phenomena. And once Eid hits, the Qurans go back on the shelf. Right? As if we're just waiting for the next Ramadan. And frankly, it's something that we don't really consider much about, maybe 11 months out of the year. So the thing to really now consider tonight And we're going to be extending this on next 2 nights. But the thing to really consider tonight is the value of the Quran in your life. How much do we engage with the Quran, not only in Ramadan, but outside of Ramadan, right? Because this Quran, it is huda, it's guidance, right? It is bayinat min al-huda, right? As the very famous ayah that's related to Ramadan, right? Shahru Ramadan alladhi unzila fihi al-Quran. That it is the month of Ramadan is which the Quran was revealed. Hudan, like it is a guidance. It is bayinat min al-huda. Bayinat, this thing that is bayin, is very clear. Meaning you don't need proofs for it. It's clear as the sun. You don't go off and ask someone like, okay, prove to me the sun exists. You're like, well, you're looking at it, man, right? That's what it means, bayin. This is the Quran, the nature of the Quran. It's clear. When you start reading it, it is clear as day. And then it is a furqan. It gives you the standard by which to know truth and falsehood. It gives you the standard by which to live your life upon a path of righteousness or a path that you know will take a person to destruction, right? And this is an amazing blessing that we don't think much about. The fact that you have a standard to actually go forth, right? Next time, bi'idhnillah, just to give you a little bit of a preview, are you guys familiar with the case of the baker recently in the Supreme Court? Right? Okay. So now what I noticed was that the Muslims are kind of divided on this case. So some Muslims are saying, look, it's not right, the ruling was not right from the Supreme Court. Why? Because it was a discriminatory ruling, and therefore in the future, if someone wants to discriminate against Muslims, this will be a problem for us. So we should support those that are going against the ruling. Then you have a group of Muslims that are saying, no, we support the ruling. Why? Because it has to do with a concept of virtue that is a part of our religion, meaning that we are against homosexuality. And therefore, we should have the freedom to, practice our faith, right, at its core. So you've got these two now opposing groups of Muslims, two opposing opinions. How do you understand which one's correct? What is the standard by which you go forth? And my argument, bidnillah, tomorrow night, will be that standard has to be rooted in the Quran. Not only rooted in the Quran, but rooted in the one that brought the Quran, meaning the Prophet ﷺ, the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah. But not in this kind of like, let me tell you 5 hadith and 2 ayat. Meaning I want us to understand from the angle of who the Prophet ﷺ was, right? So for instance, when we look at the surah we were speaking about earlier, right? Surah Al-Qadr. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr, right? That indeed we have sent down on the night of Qadr the Quran. Okay? We sent it down on the night of Qadr. Okay. How is it that it was sent down on the night of Qadr and yet it was revealed piecemeal to the Prophet ﷺ over a period of 23 years? And if you've come to the masjid, Ramadan after Ramadan, you know the answer to this. Who's going to help me out? How do you reconcile that? Or you don't? Everyone get the question? Okay. It came down on the night of Qadr, right? Okay. But yet we know that it came down piecemeal to the Prophet over 23 years. So either it came down on the night of Qadr or it came down piecemeal. How do you reconcile? Lawh al-Mahfuz, right? There's 2 issues with this. In other words, on Laylatul Qadr, it comes from that which is with Allah, right? Lawh al-Mahfuz to Sama' ad-Dunya. This is what it means, Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. It came down on the night of Qadr to Sama' ad-Dunya. And then after that, it came, I have like 1 minute or 1 hour. Okay. And then after that, it comes piecemeal to the Prophet ﷺ. Okay? Now, why am I mentioning that? And I'll say this in the last minute of my talk here. The reason I'm mentioning that is because Ibn al-Qayyim mentioned something really beautiful related to this. Ibn al-Qayyim, and I'll end with this point. Ibn al-Qayyim says that by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sending the Quran down in one shot on Laylatul Qadr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is tying the Prophet ﷺ with the other prophets. Why? Because the prophets of the past, their revelation came down in one shot. Okay? And tomorrow night I'll get into the proof as to why that's true. The prophets of the past, Musa alayhi salam, Isa alayhi salam, whatever, the revelation in one shot. So just like that, it comes down to one shot, and Allah is tying the Prophet ﷺ with the prophets of the past. At the same time, He is distinguishing the Prophet ﷺ by having it come down piecemeal to fortify his heart. So on one hand, He's tied the Prophet ﷺ to the prophets of the past. On the other hand, He has elevated and distinguished the Prophet ﷺ. And it's very beautiful when you think about it. But inshallah, next week, we're going to look at, or not next week, tomorrow, we're going to be looking at this same concept. The Prophet ﷺ being distinguished as a prophet. Specifically, why was he sent to our time? Why is he at the time he was sent? And how were the prophets of the past different? And why is it he was sent at this time? And because of that, we have the tools to understand issues like the Supreme Court ruling on the baker. So I'll go ahead and stop there because my time is up. I got the 1-minute warning. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of us our fasts. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of us our dua, our qiyam, our sayyam. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us on these various nights. As the Prophet ﷺ, when Aisha asked the Prophet ﷺ, what should we say on this night? As those you know, Allahumma innaka afuun tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anna. Oh Allah, indeed you are al-afu. In other words, you love to wipe away sins and so on and so forth. And so you love to do this, so have this quality upon us. Forgive us, wipe away our sins. So all of the sins that we have brought, that we have done the 11 months out of the year, right, as we were mentioning, maybe our neglect of the Quran, whatever it might be, whatever we have done, oh Allah, we're asking you to wipe these away from us in these blessed nights. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive me first and foremost if there were any mistakes or things that were not clear in what I had spoken, and anything of benefit is all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.